This next lesson is Chapter 8, Key Issue 3, Part 2. We will continue to talk about boundaries and how those boundaries can impact the shapes of states, contributing to both benefits and challenges that states face because of those shapes. Countries may fall under one of 5 basic shapes: compact, elongated, prorupted, perforated, or fragmented. If a country is compact, the distance from the center to any boundary doesn't vary too significantly. The ideal compact state would be shaped like a circle, with the capital at the center and the shortest possible boundaries to defend. A compact state is going to have better communication. It's also going to be able to defend itself better. It's also important to note that a compact state does not inevitably mean that a state will be more peaceful, because compact states are just as likely to experience civil war and ethnic rivalry. Next, an elongated state is also known as an isolation state, and it has a long and narrow shape. Some of these countries that fall under this category include Malawi and the Gambia. An elongated state may suffer from poor internal communication, as an extreme end may be isolated from the capital. A prorupted state may offer access or disruption. So a prorupted state is created for 2 principal reasons: a reason to access a resource like water, or to separate 2 states that could share the same boundary where there may be conflict. A perforated state is best described by South Africa, as the state completely surrounds another one, and so the perforated state would be Lesotho being perforated by South Africa. In this case, the state that is surrounded may face problems or dependence on the surrounding state. Lesotho, surrounded by South Africa, must completely depend on South Africa for import and export of goods. An example would be Vatican City, which is an independent state completely surrounded by Italy. Lastly, for these 5 basic shapes includes fragmented states, and a fragmented state includes several discontinuous pieces of territory. This can be a chain of islands, also known as an archipelago, or it can be 2 pieces of land that are separated by another country. In other words, the 2 kinds of fragmented states are those separated by water and those separated by an intervening state. Fragmented states face problems with communications and maintaining national unity. Another category that states fit into, although is not directly associated with shapes, include landlocked states. Landlocked states lack direct outlet to the sea because of completely being surrounded by several other countries, or maybe even one country. Take a look at Figure 8-37, located on page 286 of your textbook. All 5 shapes are represented by different countries in Africa. Counterclockwise from top right, you've got Uganda, Rwanda, and Burundi that are all compact. The Democratic Republic of the Congo and Namibia are proruptions. The Gambia is elongated, Angola is fragmented by the DRC, and South Africa is perforated by Lesotho. Countries in the bright color are landlocked with no ocean boundaries. Looking at Figure 8-38, we can see several landlocked states and rail lines in Africa. Landlocked states must import and export goods by land based on transportation, primary rail lines, and to reach ocean ports in cooperating with neighbor states. South Africa is the only state in Africa with a dense rail network. As you can see, rail is the most cost-effective way to transport goods to and from landlocked states, but not all states have good access to ocean trade. Notice that the orange colors of states indicate landlocked countries. You've got Mali, Niger, Chad, the Central African Republic, South Sudan, Uganda, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Botswana. Also keep in mind that Lesotho, as we talked about being a perforated state, is also a landlocked state. The next topic is regime types. These are the types of governments that countries have adopted, and they can be categorized into three different groups. A democracy where citizens elect leaders, and those leaders can run for office. An autocracy is where a country that is run according to the interests of the ruler rather than the people. So oftentimes you hear people talk about dictatorships. And then an onocracy, and this is a country that is not fully democratic or fully autocratic, but displays a mix of two types. An onocracy, which might be Russia, would be considered a democracy because of the free elections that are held, but also an autocracy because when the figurehead is viewed often as a dictator for being very strong and aggressive, and also intimidating opposition, this might be more of an example of an autocracy. When deciphering the difference between the three, you want to focus on three essential elements: the selection of leaders, citizen participation, and checks and balances to make sure that government doesn't become too powerful. It is fair to say that democracy has been expanding for a number of reasons. One, the replacement of irrelevant and out of touch monarchies, and those being replaced by elected governments. Also, a focus on individual rights and liberties. We're also looking at the participation of people in policy making, particularly by citizens. And then we're also looking at just the influence that government structures in Europe and North America have, and how much impact that has on the rest of the world. In addition to regime types, we also have a consideration for how government is organized. A government may be organized as a unitary state, which is a strong central government, or a federal state with both strong local and regional governments. So this means more of the power in policymaking is in the hands at a local level versus a national level. Unitary states may be more common in smaller size states, and federal states would be more common in larger states. Now, this isn't always definitive, as some small states may still carry on a federal model because may have multiple ethnicities, and they want to make sure that those ethnicities are extended a certain amount of power in policymaking. Unitary governments may be used to maintain a sense of nationality or unity. When we're looking at federal governments, remember that has a lot to do with size. The larger the country, the more difficult it is to govern different regions of that country. In addition, federal models are becoming more attractive, and countries are adopting those models because when we look at the different ethnic groups that make up the state, if an ethnic group is a minority but isn't large enough to really achieve self-determination as an independent state, they may be more satisfied having some authority in creating local laws. Let's take a quick look at Table 8-1, located on page 289 of your textbook. We've got elements, democracy, and autocracy to describe those elements. So for the first category, selection of leaders, a democracy would indicate institutions and procedures through which citizens can express effective preferences about alternative policies and leaders. In an autocracy, leaders are selected according to clearly defined, often hereditary rules of succession from within the established political elite. In looking at citizen participation, when looking at a democracy, we've got institutionalized constraints on the exercise of power by the executive. What that means is that the structure of the institution ensures that there is a check on an executive figurehead from having too much power. And then with an autocracy, citizens' participation is restricted or suppressed. So there isn't that same sense of check. And then looking at checks and balances more exclusively in a democracy, that's the guarantee of civil liberties to all citizens in their daily lives and in acts of political participation. Civil liberties are rights that individual citizens have that the government cannot take away from them. In the United States, when we think of civil liberties, we think of the right to free speech or the right to assemble, to petition, to religion. These are just some examples. In an autocracy, leaders exercise power with no meaningful checks from legislative, judicial, or civil society institutions. So they've got a lot of power, and with that power comes a violation often of these liberties. Looking at figure 8-39, located on page 288 of your textbook, you see governance regimes vary with full democracies and autocracies. A few countries are considered failed states because they effectively have no government. Some examples of these failed states include Libya and South Sudan, where government institutions have broken down because of civil war, extreme poverty, or natural disasters. Some even a combination of all three. Take a look at figure 8-40 located on page 288 of your textbook. You'll see that governments have become more democratic and less autocratic, especially since the 1980s. The most rapid increase in democracies came after the breakup of communist states in Europe. Looking at figure 8-41 located on page 289 of your textbook, we see that the most fragile states are clustered in Africa, especially south of the Sahara. The State Fragility Index is based on the extent of regional unrest among disaffected citizens, the ability of a legal system to enforce contracts and property rights, the level of compliance with paying taxes, and freedom to express diverse political views. Another major contribution is the exploitation of the continent that continues into today. We learn about it historically with colonization, but this exploitation is still happening with major corporations from countries all over the world, extracting the valuable resources from the continent and reaping the benefits of that wealth that are not received by the citizens of those African countries. We will further discuss the extent of this exploitation in a future UN simulation. The last topic we're going to talk about is gerrymandering. What gerrymandering is ensuring that a political party happens to have an advantage, even though when it comes to numbers, they do not. And so the first type of gerrymandering we're going to talk about is a wasted vote. A wasted vote is when opposition supporters are spread across many districts as a minority. Assume there are 50 voters, 20 supporters of the red party and 30 supporters of the blue party. If the blue party controls the redistricting process, it could create a wasted vote gerrymandered by creating all 5 districts with slender majorities of blue party voters. Pictured here, you see 5 districts have a slight majority of blue party voters, 6-4 in each. There is also excess vote gerrymandering. This is where opposition supporters are concentrated into a few districts. Although only 20 of 50 voters are Red Party supporters, if the Red Party controls the redistricting process, it could create an excess vote gerrymander. 3 districts have a slender majority of Red Party voters, and 2 have an overwhelmingly majority of Blue Party voters. In other words, even though the Red Party has fewer total voters, concentrating Blue Party voters into 2 districts gives the Red Party a majority in 3 of 5. Lastly, we're going to talk about a stacked vote. And stacked vote gerrymandering happens when distant areas of like-minded voters are linked through oddly shaped boundaries. And in this example, the Red Party controls redistricting and creates 5 oddly shaped districts. 3 with a majority of Red Party voters and 2 with an overwhelmingly majority of Blue Party voters. Again, boundaries can be drawn to connect distant groups of voters in this case, giving the Red Party a majority in 3 of 5 districts, despite being smaller in number than the Blue Party. Some states go to lengths of ensuring that districts are not gerrymandered by using independent commissions to determine those boundaries, and other states have very strong instances of gerrymandering. Take some time to look at the states that have higher levels of gerrymandering on this map.